So here we are with the Hebrew letters again, and we're in the final few. We've done alef, bet, gimel, dalef, hey, vav, zayin, het, tet, yod, kaf, which has a final form, lamed, mem, which has a final form, nun, which has a final form, samach, ayin, hey, which has a final form, and now we're doing tzadi, which also has a final form before we do the last few. So we're in Tzadi. I tend to spell it with a Z when I translate it into or transliterate it into English. Tzadi. Some people think it's Tzadi with just an S, a very strong S. It's the 18th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. There's obviously 22 in all. It's got a numerical value of 90. As I've said before, we count 1 to 10 for the first 10 letters, and then we go 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, etc. And it sounds like sound, and it has a meaning which some say means righteousness, but it also means hunt, to hunt for something, to search for something. And there is one source I saw that said it has a literal meaning of a hook, to hook something up. Letters, as I've said in Hebrew, have are all letters do, but in Hebrew it's very clearly defined that they have a place in the voice where they are found. And the tzadi is found in the teeth, s sound, very much in the teeth, as if you're clenching your teeth together. So that's tzadi sound. What does tzadi mean? As I said at the start, it's some people say it just stands for tzaddik, but some people say it's sayyid. They put the extra vowels elsewhere. So either righteous person or hunting. Most people just tend to think of it as representing the righteous tzaddik, tzadi, meaning the tzaddik, the righteous person. Obviously, it's interesting that letters can mean one thing and almost its opposite. They've got dual meanings that teach us that we have dualities about us. We're not just one thing, we have other things to us. As I said, the Tzadi also has a final version when it appears at the end of the word. And the final version looks very much like a tree. It's a rather beautiful idea. As if a very righteous person is planted in the ground, it forms a tree, like a foundation for us. A righteous person is the foundation of the world, and through his or her personality and actions, the entire world exists. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. But this is what it looks like in various designs. It's got these three little tags on, which I talked about a couple of weeks ago, that these were added. And interestingly enough, there's a midrash about Moses going up Mount Sinai, which is this week's Parsha that I also just did this morning, and finds God's adding on this tagin and asks what's that about? And God says, oh, in about 1,000 years, there'll be a Rabbi Akiva, who will derive lots and lots of meanings from each of these. So don't you worry about it at the moment. It will come later. What does it look like? It looks like a nun, the letter nun, and a yod on it, the letter yod on it. So yod, as I said, was a 10th letter. Nun we did a few weeks ago. This letter, and this is the final fancy version of it. This is how it appears quite often in scripts. The one that's at the beginning or in the middle of the word, and this is the final version. In the cursive everyday writing, it's written quite differently for very specific reasons, so that it doesn't get muddled up with letters that it looks like. So it gets this very strange, like a letter 3. And the final version is more like a sort of S, shape, I suppose, but it's to get it away from other things. What does it all mean? Righteousness and humility are the defining traits of the Tzadi letter, or the Tzaddik, the person, the righteous person. The shape is that nun with a yud, or yod riding on top of it. Sort of yod often is this tiny letter that floats up above, and it's the first letter of the tetragrammaton, yud hey vav hey, that we tend to say Adonai to, and other people call it Yahweh or something. I'm not sure, but the yud hey vav hey, and so it often symbolizes the creator, that animates all this matter that dwells down here, this nun that's down here. Lots of words that really interesting words that have Tzadi in it. Tzaddik, obviously, this is how it's spelled out, a righteous person, tzaddik. But the final form comes in a word that's used a lot, so that you'll hear, if you read the Bible, Eretz Yisrael, Eretz, land. So it ends with a ts sound, Eretz. There's also a wonderful one that comes up in mystical circles called Simsum. And Simsum is the contraction that God does to make room for the universe. We have this idea that God is everywhere, but has to, and fills the universe, but then there'd be no space for the created stuff of the universe. So God has to do some sort of contraction to make some space for the universe, without altering God's self, because the universe is part of God as well. And this contraction is called the Simsum, and it's a sort of humility, and it's something that we try to teach for ourselves, that there's some sort of humility about contracting yourself to make space for the other. It's a very, very big idea, and the Simsum is part of that. We also wear on our clothing tzitzit, tzitzit, and there are those ritual fringes that you'll see on the ends of clothing. There are lots of knots in them, and the 4 groups add up to 613, which are the mitzvot, the number of commandments in the 5 books of Moses, the Torah. So the tzitzits are very significant numbers as well. The Tzur Yisrael, you'll hear a lot. The Rock of Israel is another name for God, is this sort of rock. Tzur. In the Israeli constitution, when they were writing it for the new state of Israel in 1948, nobody wanted to use the word God in it, because they didn't want it to be a religious theocracy, like other ones that were being formed at the time. As Israel, Pakistan was being carved out of India, and it became the Islamic State of Pakistan. Well, this Israel was not going to be called a religious thing, and so a couple of people thought, well, we are Jews, so we're going to put something in. So they managed to slip in the word Sur, and everybody knew what they meant by Sur. They meant the Rock of Israel, which is God. So they slipped that in kind of slightly, so that they had to bow down to that there is something more than them there. Because the other famous Sur word is Sion, out of the word of God comes out of Sion, Zion. A congregation, there's lots of words for congregation. Kalal is the main one, but Sibor is also a name for a congregation, a gathering. Another very, very fundamental word that comes out is Selim. We are made B'Tselem, in the image of God. So Selem is the image, and it's right at the start of in Genesis. People are made B'Tselem, humans are made B'Tselem, in the image of God. All humans are in the image of God. And the other word that I thought was quite interesting comes up very early in Genesis 2. It's selah, rib or side. Eve comes out of the side of Adam. In fact, what people think is that that they are joined together back to back, and then they separate out. And so you go from this image of a one-sided person to two-sided, two sides side by side. So Selah is rib or side. The Tzadi represents the Tzaddik, the person who is just, as well as the righteousness of the Creator. And the Tzaddik obviously strives to be true, loving justice and fairness, and straight and fully honest with their conscience. The idea is the world is broken. There's a shattering of the vessels, it's called, when the Simsum occurs. So every person has to face their own evil, their own bad side, and learn to restore it. And it's a balance. You can't have good without an idea of something that is opposite to good. And the opposite to good, obviously, is bad or evil. And so you have to face that side of you. The Tzaddik, though, is the foundation of the world. One reason why the world is created is so that the Tzaddik is allowed to be here. Another trait of the Tzaddik is that they are a sort of a hiddenness to them. There's an idea that there are 36 incredibly righteous people in the world. We can't see them. We don't know who they are. They're just amongst us. And because the Tzaddik is an ordinary person whose statue is as this very righteous person is hidden in the world. And there's a hiddenness about being very, very righteous. There are other things about Tzaddik, that the good versus the evil idea, the opposites. The actual letter of the Tzaddik looks very much, Tzadi rather, looks very much like an alef. It's just got, this has moved slightly different place, but it's very, very similar. And of the 22 letters of the alphabet, they pair into 11 pairs. 11 plus 11 is 22. And these two forms sort of represent the relationship between letters, which happens when you make words. You make relationships between letters, of course. The mate of the alef, the master of the universe, is the alef, is the tzaddik, the righteous one upon whom the world stands. As it said, as I said before, due to the tzaddik, the world is formed because of righteousness. And so you've got this idea that that the alef, this breath that comes in and starts creating the universe, the tzaddik is their counterpoint, their mate, that the world is formed because of righteousness. Obviously, we are all striving to be like that righteousness. That's the point of us, is trying to be as righteous as we can be. And so there's lots of relationships in Kabbalah. When I said there were these different characteristics or midot, where we have these upper ones, which are all, the crown being way up in sort of the highest level of Sephirah. We have this understanding and wisdom from which the world is created. And these 7 lower characteristics, which are what we strive to be good at, being loving and kind, but also having restraint, not going all over, bleeding all over everybody, sort of thing. And the alef represents this line between love and strength, between chesed and gevura, these two. And the Tzadi comes from that strength to represent the quality, tiferet, or beauty or balance, that balances between kindness and strength. You need a balance. And Tiferet is the beauty, the balance between incredible giving out of love and over loving, not having any restraint. And Gevurah, which is about boundaries and restraint. And this Tiferet represents this sort of balance between them. The Tzadi, as I've said, begins the word Tselem, the divine image in which God created man. And in Kabbalah, we are taught that Tzadi of the Tz, the first letter of Tzad, Tselem, corresponds to a three consciousness state of the soul, mind, heart, and action. And because we don't just live in this sort of mind state, these are the sort of emotional parts of our lives where we are always striving to improve them throughout our lives, but they're about more action in the world. There are four worlds we talk about, these being very high up in soul world, but we live in much more in this world of action, of doing. And so we're looking at trying to improve this action of doing. And the Tzadi is up here, whereas the Lamed and the Mem of Tselem are bringing together our other sides to form a foundation, because we need to be able to put foundations into the world that we're going to live in. And so the Tzadi corresponds to the sort of mind, heart action. You have a thought, then it goes to your emotions of how you feel about doing it, and then you act on it, mind, heart, action. And then the Lamed and Mem of Tselem become these two these two other transcendent levels, the living one higher, which is a very high soul state, and the single one, which we talk about as Yechid, being in union. And so the worlds of these four worlds form levels of our souls, and most of the time we're down in a slightly lower level than these higher levels, but that's what we're striving for. The Tzaddik can get up to the higher levels. The other thing I said is the 5 letters that have final versions to them. Kaf, Mem, Nun, Pei, we've done all of those, and this is Tzadi. And we don't really know why there are 5 letters, or why there are final letters, final versions of letters. We don't know if it's a grammatical thing. Rabbi Eliezer says within these 5 final letters is the secret of redemption. There's always some secret mystical idea to it. Having something that's just grammar isn't quite as mystical, of course, as saying there's an idea of redemption. You finalize a form. In the number system, Tzadi represents, it might be the 18th letter, but it represents, it's used to count, and it means 90. It stands for 90. And its final form, the Sofit form, represents 900. But with many of these Sofit letters, they don't actually use them for counting. They tend to use other ones like Tav, Tav, and Kuf, 400, 400, and 100. Very seldom do people use these final forms to represent 900 or 800 or whatever. I don't know why. It's quite interesting because it would be a much easier shorthand to use a Sofit, but there must be some reason behind it. I've yet to find out. Tzadi is an abbreviation, also stands for north. You know, we do NSWE, north, south, west, east. Well, Tzadi means north. It's also one of the 7 letters that receive those tag-ins that I talked about before. These are all letters that get these sagging on them, these extra little crowns on them. Also, because it's the 18th letter in the alphabet, in Jewish tradition, the 18th represents life, because the word for life, chai, is 18. Ch and yod, 8, het and yod come to 18. And this is the 18th letter. So people try to tie these ideas up that this word also has 18, and this is the 18th letter. One who safeguards himself and uses his limbs and body properly, uses his nefesh soul rather than his higher soul, will be a righteous person, a tzaddik, and live a long life. Nice idea. I like the idea about the north, south, east, west to it, because of course space in the Hebrew version has 6 dimensions to it. So I should have shut this away to make it easier to read. And that's what limits and defines it in Hebrew terms. There's above and below, right, which is south, and left, which is north, and in front, east, and behind, which is west. And these are the 6 directions in which we shake the lulav when we do, when we come up for tukot. We those leaves that we shake, and they are shaken in various directions. So we do these north, south, east, west, above and below. And of course, each one of them in Kabbalah has a spiritual sense to it. And because Tzadi represents north, obviously there's a whole load of representations about what these mean to people. One characteristic, though, and what I liked about the idea of opposites, is one characteristic of a dimension or measurement is that it requires at least 2 references point. You can't say something is just here. You've got to measure it against somewhere else. So if I'm measuring how long something is, I had to start somewhere to end somewhere. And if you're measuring about qualities like tzaddik qualities, there must be people who have non-tzaddik qualities, and most of us live in the world where we aren't living in as a tzaddik, and we're striving to be one, but we might not have got there yet. So the creation of a tzaddik suggests that there must be something that isn't tzaddik that gets created as well. You can't live in this world by itself. The word Tzadi, as I said, has a gematria of 90 on it. And there's an idea of when you are 90, you are bent over, a little bit like the shape of the Tzadi, which is slightly bent over, and bowed over with a weakness. But it also is a representation of humility. And I've already said that the Tzimtzum is an idea of humility, that God contracts himself. So maybe when you become 90, you become a little bit more humble. You bend over and contract yourself. And also bending over reminds us of the bait, the baruch, the blessings that you make, because the blessings, the word baruch, blessing, also means knee, to bend your knee and bow over. And here you are as a 90-year-old bending over to make a prayer. And recognizing the connection with something more than yourself. At 90, they're saying that you've achieved a heightened level of prayer and you're more able to pray constantly. You're more in that ability. The word tzaddik that comes from Tzadi has a gematria of 204 if you add up all the letters of tzaddik. It comes to 204, which is 2 times emunah, which has a gematria of 102. So the tzaddik that lives by their faith, they've got this double quotient of faith, and there's lots of levels of faith that they can live by. In the Sefer Yetzirah system, the Tzadi is one of the 12 simple elemental letters. We've gone through quite a few of them: Hey, Vav, Zayin, Het, Tet, Yud, Lamed, Mem, Lamed, Nun, Samech, Ayin, Tzadi, and we've got Kuf to come. So this is the 11th of 12. And while it has space connections to it and time connections to it, it also has this body-soul connection to it. And some say it's Tzadi sounds for thought, which is a lovely idea, that especially if you're 90, you're more thoughtful and more of a tzaddik, more engaged in prayer, which makes you meditative and thoughtful. So it's quite a nice idea. As I said, it's an elemental 7 or simple letter. It doesn't have a dagesh, a dot, and it's not one of the 3 mother letters. So it's one of the 12 other elemental letters. And it comes and it stands for, in creation, it stands for this down here, God bless them. So we know that God is blessing the humans at this stage, the ones that are made in his image, Shalom, which is a very nice idea, that we're being made in the image of God. It stands, as I said, also for thought, our thinking process, meditation, about ideas, planning, and also apparently sexual fantasies or unresolved anxiety. In space, because it's one of 12, so it has one of the zodiac signs associated with it. It's associated with Aquarius, and it's also, because it's one of the 12, it's associated with a month of the year, and this one is Shevat, and a body part which I don't know how this works, but it's apparently the right foot. So that's what Tzadi is about. And I'll end very briefly with a nice brief meditation, because it's always nice to bring some of these ideas together. So if you take a nice deep breath and settle yourself in your chair, and just relax yourself for a moment and feel yourself with your body in your chair and your breath, that alef of life, that breath of life going through you, where the world is spoken into creation. And let's think about the Tzadi, on that breath of life coming into you and making you holy. You are being breathed into holiness. You are being breathed into being B'Tselem, in the image of the Creator. And we think of the Creator as holy, loving, kind, creative, creating something beautiful. Creators don't tend to create things which aren't beautiful. And you're being breathed into being beautiful, into being good, and into being holy. And that's quite a wonderful idea. You too are being made holy and into being a tzaddik, that hidden alef and that hidden tzaddik. They're all relationships to one another. The alef, the air being breathed into you, is in relationship to the tselem, the image that you are, and each one of us is.